you are not in the queue yet, if you've had any trouble submitting, go ahead and talk to Oculus people over here. We should still have some time maybe to get some last minute submissions in. But I think these are all loaded up, and I should be able to call up the devs as I go through them. We'll get some order if you have something you want me to start on. Okay.
Yeah, right here.
Come on up. Hi. Nice to meet you. Okay, what's the basic gist of it?
So it is a way to explore the real physical world in virtual reality. It's something I've always wanted to be able to do. The best data set available to make that happen was Google Street View. So this leverages Street View data. We have voice control. We have Wikipedia integration. And let's see what you think.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah.
All right, one thing that I point out right now is we have clickable things in the world that are basically hiding behind control icons that you've got up front.
Right, and you can hide all of the control icons by just pressing the back button.
Okay. As a subtle little thing, I think that generally highlight behaviors and selection. You've got moving and slowly fading in of the context text. In general, I think selection or focus behavior works better with an instantaneous outline and pretty much snapping in the whatever you're going to show immediately, and then maybe fading out. Movement, I'm not a huge fan of for selection. I've got this thing, I recently did a survey of all the ways that even in our first-party apps that we're doing it, there's over 20, which is ridiculous. We do not need that many different paradigms for selection focus, but I usually suggest having some audio feedback for it, so you've got the kind of clink as you go over highlighting things, and have it come up and show almost immediately, where this kind of slower movement and fade just feels a little bit more disconnected from it. And similarly, a little bit of audio during the actions. Like whenever a user does something, audio is one of the fastest things that you can give feedback for. Something that shows that it actually happened while you clicked on it. You can do things to the actual cursor, to the object that you clicked on here, like the arrow, and audio feedback, and then of course changing the screen to reflect the changes quickly as you can. But in cases like this where you've got decompression and piece loading, that won't happen immediately. So you want to be able to get something kind of like a bang instantaneous thing going. Similarly, also with that, where when you select something, having some immediate audio feedback, and if it's a button, maybe pulsing the outlines or doing something. With the scrollable section of things, those are pretty good size, and the text looks pretty good, much better than average for presentation for media browsing. I would suggest that a hard outline at the bottom where it's just truncated and clipped off is usually not the best treatment, because when you've got a physical edge of a screen, things end at the physical edge, and that's easily understandable to people. But in VR, when we have essentially an open canvas going in lots of different directions, just clipping imagery is usually not the right thing. Either have something that it looks like it goes behind a physical opaque object, or have a very brief fade region where it's clear that it's going from its visible state to invisible. And that should usually be fairly small. I do see some applications that have very large fade regions, which probably aren't the best direction there.
Okay.
Again, Is there any audio at all in this, or is it?
No, not yet. That is something
Okay.
new. We,
So I'll stop mentioning audio things. Where in almost all of the cases, you should have some kind of a soundscape for what's going on.
Right.
Especially in a vision like this, in an ideal world of 360 photos, you have some kind of appropriate background audio track going, but you deal with the data that you've got, and if you've got Street View, then it's probably not worth trying to tag.
Yeah, we've been looking at including a set of potentially appropriate ambient clips.
And that's if you've got an approachable number, like a couple hundred things that you're going through as recommended ones, just going through and picking between 10 different soundtracks probably is a good use of your time. But if this is opening up to the millions of different possibilities, then not so much. So I'm seeing cursor changes here, and it's not clear to me what it's doing. There were arrows in the previous one. Is this, are there supposed to be arrows visible here with the highlights?
Data. So sometimes we have data with arrows. That's actually the depth map that comes along with the Street View data. And if it has a white cursor, essentially that is pointing to the same panorama that you're in. If the cursor's blue, it's somewhere that you can go.
Okay, that's not easily understood. I communicated there. So then what does specifically the arrows mean?
It indicates that there is a panorama available in that direction. And you can click it to go to the first panorama in that direction. If you point further out, you might jump, say, 5 or 6 panoramas forward.
There might be something that seems like an overloaded communication of information. Like you might be able to do something you've got a reasonably sizable cursor spot there. If it changed, it would be interesting to be able to map the change, like as I'm moving it around, if it changed visibly in some way as I was 1 panorama away, 2 away, 3 away.
I like that.
It does look like I can pretty quickly respond to that, so that was something that I was going to check for there to see if you can move away before it's finished loading, which is important for being able to go forward. I would suggest that you buffer up clicks like that, like if you're looking at some straightaway there, if I'm clicking on the forward one, being able to do like 3 quick clicks to move 3 steps probably would be a good thing.
Yep. Yeah, we've had requests for time lapses, preloading all of the imagery along a path and playing it almost like a video. It's something that I think could be fun.
So are you, let's see, so I can go all the way, okay. You know, it might be nice, because you know exactly where the panorama is and you have some sense of planar distance there, because you're not able to go to exactly where the cursor is, highlighting like where it's going to go would be useful, because if I clicked at one particular point there, I'm not in exactly the spot that I wanted to go to. But if you've got a continuous cursor moving around and then it was highlighting like exactly which one it would go to, that would probably work out fairly well, because then you could see it clinking along to new ones, and if you want to go a little bit further, you just keep moving until it changes to a highlight. And then, I'm not sure what to do with the arrows, because it seems like the arrows become mostly redundant at that point.
You can't turn them off in settings.
Okay. So it's pretty decent quality on the media selection. You know, my hot button's about text rendering. Is this done in Unity?
It is, yes.
So this is definitely better than par 4 for most Unity work. That's something almost all the things that I wind up looking at have poor text rendering. And this is not as good as you could get with putting it on a layer and doing it all perfect, but this is not bad at all. I do wonder I think the UI should probably go away. When you select something, I've selected that because that means I want to go there. I no longer want to be selecting things in the UI. I would think like picking a movie off, throwing the UI away immediately would be the right thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah, so like right there, I had a slightly confusing movement transition where it wasn't where I was pointing to that could be fixed by a good highlight there. I actually didn't know that Street View had this granularity of stops in a lot of places.
Yeah, their coverage is incredible.
So you could probably get, it's pretty rewarding walking around as it is, but if you start getting kind of like hardcore technical on it, there's probably a lot you could do to speed up the actual panorama loading, especially when you're taking single steps in there, starting a speculative preload before you actually make the next move. Although you need to make sure you can abort that quickly if the user chooses to go into a different direction. But having that ability to just kind of keep clicking forward, and if you're on a good enough connection there, it could possibly be, be loading almost seamlessly. If the user feels like it's happening instantly, then even if you had to do a lot of work behind the scenes, it's worthwhile. Now, a common point that I'll make about almost all user interfaces in VR is that the standard desktop and mobile interface is act on release. So you select something and then it only does it when you release. It gives you the opportunity in theory to cancel by moving outside that. But in VR in general, it feels tons more responsive if you do act on press. Often it takes 150 milliseconds or so for someone to go from press to release. And that is saving a whole bunch of time that to make it up in terms of like doing your loading faster is very, very hard. But to just make it happen instantly when they click is actually easy. And so that sense of that instant that the click goes down, playing an audio cue, something changes visually and it immediately starts going. So by the time they've released their finger, you may be able to have it already working. And let me just take a look at some of the other things you've got in here. Show me Rome.
Oh, you have to click again to finish the recording and send it off.
Rome.
If you click one more time.
Rome. I don't think it's working.
Huh. Okay. May have run into trouble
Oh,
there.
actually, I'm not sure it's able to come out of back button's not working either. It may be locked here.
It's funny, we've had feedback that this does happen for some users, and we haven't been able to reproduce it.
Works on his machine.
Welcome to live demos.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then having very slight, subtle cues for audio cues as well for as you're moving the cursor around. As it changes from and it should probably be more explicit of like nothing there rather than just changing color. Changing color alone is one of the weaker things that you can do for user feedback. Changing the shape of the outline is a lot stronger, or animating when it does different things. But going from a nothing here, makes some kind of a little clink sound as it goes here, and as it moves, the smart move on this is identifying a data store of immense quantity there, and then figuring out how you can curate it and present it in a way that is useful to users. So I think that focusing on, really concentrating on making it rewarding to go through that. And this does come down to so much of the like micro details of the user experience. Just you're moving this around and occasionally clicking. It should always feel like it's responding to your wishes. And as you move it around, doing the things so that it just feels like a precision exploration. You're moving it over and then there, and then bam, you're there as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think there's some good stuff here. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
What should I look at next? Hey, so tell me about the game.
A Hardlight Blade is an action game that basically you have a laser sword or a lightsaber, and you get to slice up robotic enemies that shoot lasers at you. And there's a couple different modes that mix that up a little bit to make it more fun and add some variety.
You know, there's something that is it's probably in the native Unity integration that bothers me on almost all the apps that have the kind of laggy follow you around load screen. I wish we could get rid of that globally in a lot of places.
Me too.
Right, the text is a little shimmery down there. Do you localize into different languages?
I do not.
If not, I would recommend turning that into a texture. Then it'll look good. A lot of people do wind up doing, I like the use of turn around to see things like credits. I think it's a good use of VR. And those are pretty easy to read, but the layout is problematic there, where it's two columns that are wide enough that it winds up kind of covering the entire field of view, which is a hard way to read text. And in general, a design rule is never make users read something in perspective. Like right here, I'm looking at the front, but the actual columns are over here, so it's a little bit off and bent in perspective a little bit. I note that this is a Go that doesn't have the new chromatic aberration correction on it, which makes all of this so much better. And even if you've got a cylindrical layer or drawing things in a cylinder, does keep you from ever having to read things in perspective, and then you're just worried about whether you've got good column breakups. So for this, either splitting it into, you've got two separate columns, breaking it and having each of them be user-facing would help a little bit. Then you could just go over and look at it directly. But they're long enough that you wind up having to look up or down enough that you're still reading in perspective a little bit there. In general, generously sized text is almost always the right call. But if it winds up at a point where it's forcing a layout that becomes non-ergonomic, you might want to go a little bit smaller on the text and be able to keep it in a little bit more readable area.
Gotcha.
Okay, let's back up. You might want to have a back button from there, being able to go back up. I was going to point out that the selection laser was going stereo behind one of the UI. Okay, so kind of core aspects of responsive gameplay. Usually I talk in terms of gunplay and action shooting, but it applies for almost anything like this. You want to have a crisp response whenever possible, where it usually means an immediate sound and an immediate flash of something that occupies a lot of volume rather than growing out. So like the equivalent of a muzzle flash or blood splatter for something like this might be like an energy release where if I wind up slicing across the center, I would expect something kind of horizontally to flash out across all of that at a significant area, some energy related thing. So yeah, here is this where, so this is my general point about avoiding translucency in almost everything in VR is a good idea, where if that was a solid opaque thing rather than a blended one, it wouldn't be displaying that, that effect. But things like a subtle translucent layer where you see a little bit of background behind, I encourage people to not do it all in VR. Tend towards opaque for most things. It avoids a lot of different rendering problems, like the depth ordering issue with that. But it also avoids some of the kind of convergence problems with having two different planes at the same level. And similarly, oh, so interesting, I guess that was, may have been Acton Press. From there, I would expect audio synced in with this, where interestingly, I have a kind of lightsaber-like effect in VR Shell that has been needed to be expressed as a user setting for a long time now. And one of the ways that I made the audio work really well was I had a looping kind of lightsaber sound and I just vary the volume based on the amplitude of the gyros. And that works out really well. You sit there, you're quiet, and the faster you move it, the more audio volume comes out from it. It's a pretty deeply layered loop, so it's a complex sound, and if you don't notice that it's looping instantly, but it gives a really good feedback. So there's a couple random streaks of pixels of something that doesn't seem quite right there. So I kind of expect to be able to do the, like the old Wii slicing up the fruit in different ways on that once they're sitting there. That's kind of a neat idea. I would have an audio cue when that happens, like when it actually changes some sound effect happening. But I like that.
And then you can press the trigger to go into slow motion.
Ah, okay. And I would say from a gameplay standpoint, working on things like, I mean, in some ways this is sort of Fruit Ninja, and a lot of the things that, that they do with different things going on, different combos and other effects, that would be a good game to look at for actual play progression inspirations.
And then you can use the touchpad to move around, but I know that makes some people uncomfortable.
Okay. So do you have later levels with any other obstacles or anything?
Yes, there is a harder mode that has more obstacles, things you can move around, and harder enemies.
So I would say that the projectiles are pretty weak, where they're at that slow moving speed. It doesn't feel threatening, and it doesn't feel particularly satisfying to knock them down. If they were something that had more of a if it looked like it was 50,000 volts coming at you, with
right.
sort of a sizzle effect there, where you really don't want to get it at you. I would still make it move probably a little bit faster, and then have a very satisfying sound when you actually block it.
Yep.
Because when the user does the skill-based action, you want to be feeding back, giving them the feedback. Like when you do something like that, it should feel like you really did something.
Yeah.
And then there's like right there at the end, you had the dead your score is. That was not 3D sorted with the environment. It was drawn just on top of it, so it had the stereo confusion issue. And I would suggest like letting them hold there where you're pulled out of the experience, when that should be the pause for you to kind of contemplate how you did right there in the state of the environment, maybe allowing you to look around a little bit and see how close you could have been. Something else I don't see, is there an indicator of like how far you are through the level?
No, there's no visual indication of how far you are, how close you are to the next wave. There's a score, but... So the first few waves are identical, and I did that so people kind of thought this is familiarity, or...
Yeah, and so I'd say old pinball logic about small integer scores are not as rewarding for people who throw a couple more digits at them. And then give lots of ways to maximize the score, like if you get additional amounts for blocking the bullets, or maybe if you had something that is interesting to do might be if you have bullets coming at you, if you have the ability to not just dissipate them, but if you could actually hit them into other things, that would be very rewarding to be able to destroy a robot with somebody else in the shot. If I could go like that and send them hitting over the other direction.
Yeah, and you can actually adjust the angle of your blade to hold it more sideways. It does do that, but the way it is default, it kind of goes straight towards the ground, so I need to adjust that.
Yeah, so the core of something like this is, there are a lot of games like Fruit Ninja that have the whole gameplay progression, which is once the basics are there in terms of here's what it does, here are what your actions are, then figuring out the path of the player through, you've learned the basic actions, now here's the combo, here's the way you get the triple score, different things there. but the instantaneous feedback of making it a joyous action to be doing this, where it should be fun to swing the blade, it should be fun to connect on it, on everything, and to pull off the special moves in the different cases where you get to do something like that. That's the joy in a game of this style, and it's all in those kind of micro details. Audio is super important, but then the presentation of the graphics feedback is also great, where like in there, when you do actually hit them, they're kind of carving apart, but having that sense of you just did, thinking about it like 50,000 volts going through this, and you've got some crackle of energy and lightning and things falling off, and everything having an impact on the world around it. You should just be able to have something where you know you're onto something, and you've got the game where it's doing nothing but sending the enemy out one at a time, and somebody will just sit there and keep hitting them over and over. And that happens in the best of games like that, where it's just so much fun to do the thing. All the rest of the player's progression is just guiding you through essentially the same thing, but you're still having fun through all of it. Yeah, thank you.
Next up is satisfactory. Do we have the satisfactory dancer?
Yeah.
Hey. Good. So what's the game about?
So the game Satisfactory is actually not so satisfactory when you get to. It's a game, an actual satirical game based on in the future where robots will work in a factory, and you're a robot worker, and you've gotten hired to basically build items. So you get all the items on the conveyor belt, and you've just got to build these items that appear in a blueprint. And over time, I implemented something which is the core gameplay, which is something that I think a lot of people relate to in working, is you take on other people's jobs. And in there, the other robots will get fired slowly over time, and you take on their roles. So you've got more and more stuff to do within the levels, and it gets more and more complicated. So yeah, just wanted to see what you do. We're in a very early prototype, so actually in terms of the graphics, some of those things are taken off the asset store to sort of build an environment. But right now it's mainly the framework and some audio I've been putting in there.
The first thing coming up, the text is, I mean, I'm going to say that about almost everything, but but on the other side, like the place cubes here for more detail is quite legible text, although I generally tell people don't ever float text randomly over the, over the environment. Put a solid opaque background behind it. I can see on like the arrow, there's a little bit of stray pixels at the edge. And then the stuff in the back is hard to read. So it feels like what is floating over my head? There's like a some colored
Is it just a black?
well, there's the black ceiling, but then there's a dark colored polygon square sitting on top. Okay.
So I just added that, so I'm trying to see if it actually works well. Because originally I had the other more basic loading and it was a bit jittery. So
All right, that's reasonably.
is that okay? That one?
Yeah, it's not bad.
That's good.
So I just lost my controller. Did you check the battery on this? Okay. Although it just rolled back up there and I hadn't read it yet. I'm doing my controller. Okay, that's all fairly legible. All right, so am I supposed to be pulling out my train pieces? Okay, I wasn't clear right there. I was clicking on something in the distance and it wasn't being picked up. Since that's the core gameplay mechanic for this, I would say you want to invest quite a bit of effort into that, where you should always show someone if clicking a trigger is going to do something at that point. Where, like right now, as I'm looking through these things, when I pick some, it should highlight in some way to So I'm not clear what it's doing here, where it's showing red in some cases. Are those the pieces that don't work, but
Well, then I put a distance on it so you can't actually pick things too far away, because I didn't want to make it too...
then the pointer definitely shouldn't extend that far away.
Okay.
I shouldn't look like I can poke at something.
And I was trying to add I've had a lot of trouble trying to add a throw mechanic. So the green ones, you can throw them in the bin on the right. So you've got a bin on the right, you can pick them up, and you throw them into a contaminated bin. But I found like throwing stuff with the Go controller was really hard.
Yes. And so it's not clear to me why some of the
So
ones...
if you throw that one on the right, there's a bin on the right, over there. You try and get it in that, but you can throw it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so the distinctions between those aren't very clear.
You can actually bring things close. So once you grab an object, you can bring it closer and further away from you with the trackpad.
Yeah, that's a mechanic that's not universally understood, so worry a little bit about that. So I had that other case right there again where I thought that I picked it up, I didn't respond. So having, like, if I'm clicking the trigger, it should be doing, that was interesting, it kind of tossed. But it should be having some feedback, ideally both audio and visual, when it's going. And this does make you want to fight the limitations of 3DOF, where I've got an occluder here, where in a 6DOF headset, I would lean over so that I can see further. So part of the art of designing for 3DOF is to build it in a way that the user never wants to do something that the hardware won't allow them to do.
Well, I actually moved that because I thought I didn't want people to see too far. Because I found that you could actually see the pieces well ahead of time. But then I do agree that at the same time, maybe it makes people think about that too much.
Yeah. And so, like, I had the problem just there of I picked something up, moved it over there, and it hadn't responded. So I thought, oh, that's the wrong thing. Where as soon as it gets there, it should probably be, be giving the feedback effect, maybe just quicker than it is now, maybe on a different fix. If there's a time limit, usually you need some kind of a countdown going on, so you know that you've got time pressure and you care about it.
There's the other, well, there's on the left, there's one go down. Maybe I should put a sound to say that you're coming to the end of it.
So there's a sound. So that feels like it should happen, like if it's not going to be allowed there, it should be happening pretty far out here. Because like I can move through, and like this would seem like I'm interacting with it at this point, but it's only when it actually moves all the way over there that it does something. And then audio-wise, I would expect it to make some kind of a sound on different collisions as things are going around there.
So that, yeah.
All right, so like I don't see a clear like in-game like exit from here, so I can hit the back button.
Yeah, the back button.
Back button to go back. So that's I am drawing transparent across the different things around the side. That's a strange UI mechanic to like place something there and then click the touchpad to start.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what you think in terms of how to start those levels like that. Because I tried a few different things and I didn't want to just drop the cube and then it just starts straight away. But
So I'm not sure that the dropping mechanic there is necessarily the right thing for selection. I know that Oculus has done that for some things. I don't really love that because it seems like an extra, it's like an extra, making the user do something for no particular reason. And it doesn't feel magical to do that. It's a little bit better with touch controllers when you're picking things up and you move them around, but with just a pointer it seems a strange, kind of a strange thing to make the user do, and just a more straightforward UI of just picking the right level. And one of the things that I've said over and over, it's kind of the surprising optimality of 2D user interfaces, that a lot of the times when you do something in 3D, like, and this is a very good example of the 3D space there, it's like a UI built on 3D things, it winds up not actually being better and usually much worse actually than if it was just a simple menu system. So I lost my, my laser pointer was stuck there for a little bit when I moved it into the...
So you can actually paint the pieces as well, which is also part of one of the jobs that you inherit. So if you place the pieces into the paint buckets on the right.
Okay, that was... So I can grab a piece.
And you can, if you move it in with the trackpad, see, this is when the trackpad comes handy to like move things back and forward.
Yeah, that's a difficult to discover mechanic, and I would say that in it's making the user, you have to let it go there. I would think that you just grab something, and I wouldn't even have like the 2 layers of things. It seems like an obvious thing. You pull something off, you set it in the paint. That seems to be just an arm motion, and requiring them to do an extra sort of 6-dotty thing from that. I don't think it feels powerful to the user, so it just winds up being kind of an extra task for them.
Right. So everything should be the same distance in terms of that movement.
Yeah, I mean, it comes out to a fixed distance here. That distance should be the distance to the paint bucket. I should be able to just grab something, dip it in the paint, and then drop it over.
Right.
That's definitely hard to control, and I don't understand why
So there's a countdown basically, so just,
it takes a while for
just to make it that more complicated. So you have to leave it in and then it's got 15 seconds, so you've got to do something else while you're waiting. And then
Yeah, I mean, it should definitely have some kind of like an incremental painting effect, so you could see inside, like the paint soaking up into it, or the colors slowly cross-fading.
That's great.
But yeah, so if it's, I mean, I could see that being kind of fun.
You just hit them, guys.
You grab things and then you just drop them over there, and so that one actually worked. That particular object landing in the right place, and if you're kind of you're chocolate factoring it for the different things that you're doing. So I note that the scrolling texture is going at a different speed than all the things that it's pulling around. Minor detail.
I was hoping you weren't going to notice that actually.
And then yeah, the occlusion of that, I would recommend lowering that because it makes me curious about what's over there. There's another robot over there, which is kind of interesting to look at, but again, I'm somewhat tempted to want to kind of get up and look a little bit, but I can't. Tying audio with every visual action, like the robot just moved over there, it would be good if it had some kind of an audio sound with that, like something tracking in 3D space. And so I don't understand gameplay-wise where
That button seems to be broken.
okay, there it is, so it did stop there. So is the idea?
I think that would make it a bit too easy, right? That's actually to stop the whole thing and go back to the menu, but I don't see why.
Oh, okay. And that counters at -80.
If you leave them too long in the paint, they just go black. They soak in too much paint.
Okay.
I don't think that's how it really works in the world, but
So the case about it looks like I should be touching something here, but but I can't. So tying limiting the length of the cursor to things that you can actually interact with. Having an audio cue for when you do pick something up. A little bit of grabbability, constant distance. And then doing that as soon as it enters an area of effect that would be right for that. And so I do have trouble discerning like the like all the different little round things, exactly tying them apart. And scale-wise, like that looks like a propeller thing there. And I can't so several of the actions do feel superfluous, like it's using manipulation as something that you're doing that's not intrinsically rewarding to the player. Talking about the gunplay or swordplay there. Ideally in a game, every action that you're doing should feel rewarding to the person doing it. That there's like, you're pulling a lever, it's a solid chunk, or you're tossing something in a useful place. Sort of the worst interactions are like when you move something over and it does the slight tip off like that. That winds up as the game basically saying, oh, you've just kind of done an incompetent action, which is not the reward that you want to be giving to the player. Although it makes you wonder, like if you could do multiple things, what happens if you do start doing this action? What should this do?
That's why I added the other plank one, so you could actually build a little house. So if you're just in the menu and you just want to build something else, you can start just knock it out of the menu and just play in the menu basically.
Different paints there.
So in terms of the money, if you see the just below you in front of you, basically there's a little cost that comes up on every item when you put them in, and you basically got to do a math calculation on how much each item costs. It's a bit of a headache because you got to try and do maths while you're trying to do this in a limited time. So I'm going to try and figure out how to make that a little bit.
So again, why were the things different colored?
The green ones, ones you're supposed to chuck into the bin.
Okay.
If you can, yeah. It's not, yeah. I mean, if you could cheat it by just using the trackpad, basically. Yeah.
So no feedback at all from there. Like into recycling, you should have something like nuclear puff coming up from there. Like it's just been vaporized and reduced to constituent
I
elements.
like that.
Oh.
The real physics right there.
Stretch it out.
That just becomes a game in itself, really.
So that's where you need some positive feedback going on there. Pop some extra stuff coming out.
Maybe I need to find a way to make it a bit more clear what the individual pieces are on the...
Yeah. And when so many of them are similar shape. And
Yeah, the wheels and the top of the... Yeah.
And like with that again, where as soon as I brought it over, you should know, leaving the user in suspense about whether they've done the right thing is not the good thing. Like right there, it'd be nice if that had just immediately clicked in.
So it should do it even though you haven't let go of the trigger, it should just click anyway.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, just like so, because then if you're getting, you just grab something, you pull it over and it dings, then it's basically rewarded you for the arm gesture initially, rather than making you do that as an intermediate step to doing the button release. Yeah, sort of. Then it does make, you do want the scrolling synchronized with the movement of them. That's causing me a little bit of difficulty tracking as my eyes move across there with the disparate speeds of the image. And we are dropping some frames here. I don't know if it's slowed down, but linear movements like this are the worst case